I can.
I'm sure he had a scratch, but he had no serious injuries whatsoever.
I can tell you stories from the disaster field. I don't know if you remember the San Marcos apartment fires.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was.
In San Marcos?
It was in San Marcos, and it was. It was on campus. Well, it was all, yeah. It was all student housing.
Not that long ago, was it?
Not that long ago at all. No, we were. I was IC for that period of time, and so when it came up that morning, because that was like, I think it was like 3:00 in the morning, something like that. When it came up that morning, we were on the ground, and we ended up. There was like 100 and some odd students. 5 died. Our team actually talked to everyone. We talked to every student, and we were working with the families. And at the time that we were going through everything, they hadn't found the bodies of the 5 yet. But one kid got burned up. Like basically, he jumped out the window. He was on fire, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, basically a boyfriend and a girlfriend, put him out. Okay, I mean literally put him out on the ground from on fire. Well, here's the story. You got 2 stories. The first story was, at that time he was in real serious conditions. We were meeting these kids in random order. It's just as they come through, because it was a what they call a multi-area resource center. And so one of our teams gets the boyfriend and the girlfriend and tells the story of how when they walked out, they saw the kid on fire, and they took their coats and everything. They put him out, and they went through that story, which is a fairly traumatic story. The next people that team, and we had I think we had 6 teams there, which is about 12 people. The next person they talked to were the mom and dad of the kid who was in the burn unit, and they're like, we heard the story about these 2 these kids that helped my son. We would really like to thank him. And the 2 people sitting there, wide eyes, they're like, we just talked to him. So we ended up getting a chaplain to ask them if we could give them the parents their names, and they're like, absolutely. I was like, well, so you want to talk about God's story? How is that one team get them back to back? But you want to talk about God being in things. And I always have to take a deep breath when I tell this story. So this girl who was on one of the upper floors. For some reason, I'm thinking the 3rd floor, but I'd have to look back at my notes. She hears the alarm, opens the door, and can't see anything. Doesn't know which way to go. Lights are out. It's all filled with it. And she sits there, and she's just like, Lord, help me out. Help me. And she goes, a man in white took my hands and led me down the stairs. And here's where the 2 stories connect. And she goes, we get down to the ground, and I look over, and there's a kid on fire right there. And the man in white, she said, I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't worry, he'll be okay. And she turned around, there was nobody there. Now, there's nobody there. And it's just like, okay.
Well, it's hard to accept with some of those things, and I don't think they're trying to be dishonest or in any way, but it's how you interpret it, it's how you perceive it at the time. I mean, and I say that out of humility because I can't tell you how many times I've either been driving and it's been late at night or whatever, and you think you see something in front of you that's not there. Not suggesting that she didn't think she saw what she saw.
All I can tell you is,
And she may have,
yeah.
but
All I can tell you is when we're out in the disaster field, there's so many stories like that. As we're watching this hurricane, it's going through it's very similar to Katrina, but it's also very similar to the storm that hit Denham Springs when we were in Denham Springs in 2016. Denham Springs, I mean, basically, imagine all of Travis County getting flooded. That's what it was. I mean, everywhere you drove 20 minutes that way, 20 minutes this way, and it was all just devastated. In Denham Springs, which is probably about the size of Cedar Park area-wise, there was only about 20 houses that weren't flooded out. But, you think about that, and then you hear the stories, of an old lady sitting there who it had never flooded in 50 years, and then all of a sudden she's like, I'm not going anywhere, and it's at her ankles. It's like, well, this is strange. And then it's at her knees. She's like, this is bad. Then it's at her hips, and she's going, dear Lord, help me. And a boat hits her front window, and it's like, I guess I'll get in the boat.
there's a joke about that.
Oh, I know, but that was a true, I mean, there's a joke about that. We've talked about that joke.
Going up and helicopter goes by.
Oh, yeah.
Boats go by.
Yep, that's true.
And God says to her,
I sent you.
I sent you 3 ways to get out.
Oh.
What more do you want?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I could go on with stories like that forever. I mean, good night. All right, tonight we really get into it. We really get into if you want to call it that golden chain that they said, that order of salvation. You could take what we talked about the last 2 weeks and put that in God's providence and not really in the line of what happens during salvation, although it fits there very nicely. But this next thing that we're talking about is the gospel call and the effective call, which that's the first thing that happens. So first of all, let's just look, before we give definitions, let's look over at Romans. You're going to hear this one over and over again, Romans 8 and starting at verse 28. And I have it in the outline form over here. In fact, let me just make this, for the time being, hold on a second. Let's put this over here. Make it a little bigger so that you can see it. But what you get is the outline of the golden chain. Now, not all the pieces are there, but they pretty much, for the most part, give you the outline. As we know, God, that causes...
Okay, real quick before you do this, what does that orange color signify?
Okay, so orange is a verb, and it's an indicative verb, which means it's the action verb. Okay.
Got it.
All right. The blue is a participle, which means it goes along with the indicative. And don't ask me to tell you what the green is, because I'm not 100% sure. So, anyways, the orange is big, and then there's you might not see it in this thing, but then there's a fire one, which is like that's the action, So, anyways, as we know, that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to His purpose. And this is the order. For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to become conformed to the image of His Son, so that He would be the firstborn among many brethren. And those whom He predestined, He called. Last week we talked about foreknowledge, predestination. Now we're talking about called. Though these whom He called, He justified. Guess what we talk about next week, or in the next few weeks? Those who he justified, he glorifies. So you get this idea that we get this order, this chain of events that happen. What we're talking about today is this call. And I'm going to give you an example after I give you the definition. And this is my own example.